Welcome to part 6 in this series of videos where we're creating a Blazor application that demonstrates cascading grids. In this video, we're actually getting round to cascading grids at last. We're going to add a grid to display walls for a room selected from the rooms grid. This relationship between rooms and walls is what I'm calling cascading grids. The results shown in the child grid, walls, depend on selections from the parent grid. We also have the project's drop-down list to consider as well. In this respect, we can treat the project's drop-down list as another grid. Let's have a look at the hopefully final results. At the end of this video, we should be able to have an application that looks like this, where we can select a project. Selecting a project will immediately display the rooms, and if we select a room, the walls for that room will be shown, and changing the room will change the walls. Changing the project will change the rooms, but since we haven't selected a room at this point, no walls are shown. But selecting a room will then show the walls for that particular room. So the data cascades down from the top, from the project down to the rooms, down to the walls. Let's have a look at the code. Before we start making changes to the index page, we might as well make the changes we know will be required to wall service. So open wall service. And we know, if we follow the pattern for rooms, that we won't need walls read all. In its place, we need a wall read by room. So I'm just going to change this code for a walls read by room. So all I'm doing here is introducing the room ID. And for the count methods, the situation for preventing duplicates is that we want to prevent the same wall name being used more than once for the same room, but it can be used for different rooms. And that when editing a wall, we need to exclude the current wall being edited from the count of wall names for the selected room. So I'm going to replace the counts with this. So we count the walls by name and room, so we're preventing walls with the same name being used in the same room, but they can be used in different rooms. And I'm excluding the wall ID when I'm doing an edit. Now, at this point, I noticed that when I was doing a wall create, that in a previous post, I'd mistyped wall type name. I'd got wall with one L there. And I've got the error in wall create and in wall update. So I'm just going to paste the correct code over these two methods. I found it terribly difficult to spot this typing error, so I'll put the code for this in the blog post that accompanies this video, and I'll put a link to that blog post in the description. So that's the wall create. We also need wall update, where there's similar problems. So that corrects those two items. But now we need to modify wall service, iWall service, to take account of the above changes to the walls read by name and the counts. So if we open iWall service, and I'll just paste over the correct code. So all I'm doing here is changing the original walls read all to walls read by name, with the room ID being passed in, and the two changes to the counts. So that should have dealt with that. So we can now have a look at the index page. And the first thing we want to do is to add a grid for walls immediately below the rooms grid. And the easiest way to do this is to copy and paste the CS HTML for rooms, including the header tag, and then replacing room with wall. So I'm just going to do that now. And I'm including the header tag there, so I'm copying that and pasting it immediately below it. And taking care, I'm going to highlight that section and then do find and replace, changing rooms with wall. And I'm going to do it for match the case. I'm only doing it for the selection, and I'm going to be cautious and just replace them one by one. And I'm now going to do it for the lower room beginning with lowercase r. So that's got our basic grid there. But before we go any further, I want to add an additional column for the area of the wall. So I'm going to effectively copy and paste this column with this code. So I'm going to change it to wall name to wall square meters, header text to area, and I'm right aligning this rather than left aligning it. Now we need to make some declarations for things like the wall grid, and the data source of walls. So I'll just do that by, again, just effectively copy and pasting again. Now we're using a new toolbar, so we need to populate the wall toolbar items when the page is opened. So effectively we're going to duplicate this section here, with more or less the same that says wall toolbar item. So we've got add, edit and delete. We've got the tool tips changed. Other than that, they're exactly the same. In the grid, let's get rid of that. In the grid, we've got a wall toolbar handler and a wall row select handler. So I'm just going to put some placeholder code in for those methods, just for the time being. And I'm going to put that at the bottom of the code. And I'm putting a hash region in here so that I can, and a closing end hash region, so that I can collapse the wall section whenever I want to. So I've got a wall toolbar handler, which will deal with the add, edit and delete, and I've got a wall row select handler. So let's save everything. We should have got rid of the red squigglies up here for the grid. I'm not sure why that's still there, but let's save everything and run it. Right, there is an error. And as usual, I've made the fatal mistake of copying and pasting and not correcting everything. Right, now we should be able to run it without any errors. So I can select a project and the rooms will be displayed as before, but we've now got our grid for walls with the title there, although I can't add, edit or delete anything for the moment. Right, let's go back to the code. To add and edit wall records, we'll use the same technique we use for rooms. i.e. we'll add a Syncfusion dialog. The dialog will be called from the wall grid toolbar handler and will be populated by a wall add edit object. The dialog, in turn, will call methods for saving a wall record and cancelling. At this stage, we're going to concentrate on the interlinking of grids rather than a fancy dialog and calculating wall area. That will come in the next video. The dialog will simply have two input boxes, one for the wall name and the other for area in square meters. So I'm going to copy and paste the code that we need for that. I'm going to insert the code for the wall dialog after the dialog for the room. So up here. So I'm calling it dialog wall. I'm using an edit form with a model of wall add edit. We've got a method when we click the save button that we'll call wall save. And I've got two text boxes, the text box for the wall name and a numeric text box for the area in square meters. I've put a line break between the two text boxes and I discovered I needed to put that BR tag in its own separate div. I'm not quite sure why, but it works with that there. On the numeric text box, we've got a format of N2, so it'll put comma-separated thousands and show 2 decimal places. And I've also had to add this CSS class to make the number right aligned. We now need to declare a few variables. So in the declaration section here, we've got under the dialog room, I'll put the equivalent for the dialog wall and the wall object wall add edit, and we'll now deal with that style. So I'll enter that extra bit of style in here. I'm no CSS expert, but this seems to do the job of right aligning it. For the moment, we will add two placeholder methods for wall save and cancel wall, and I'll add the following code at the end of the code section. So wall save, we've got two conditions. One, it's an insert or it's an edit, and cancel wall will just close the dialog. So that should have got rid of the errors in the dialog itself, which it looks to have done. And we can now look at calling the dialog from the walls grid. The link between the room and a wall record is that the wall model has a field for the room ID. We must therefore ensure that a room has been selected from the room grid and its ID obtained before we allow the wall dialog to open to add a new wall. So we're going to insert the following at the top of the wall toolbar handler. It's only really needed for an add, but I don't see there's any harm in having it for the add and the edit. It's not doing any harm up there. And now we need to wire up the add option. We want the add button to open the wall dialog with a new wall add edit object and an appropriate title. So we can just put this code in here. So that's going to give a dialog title saying add a wall. We're creating a new wall add edit object, and then we're displaying or showing the dialog. So that's now, before we can deal with the save button, we're going to be using the wall service. So we just need to inject at the top of the code the wall service, and I'm going to replace the wall save for an add with this, and then I'll explain it. So first of all, we're going to check there aren't any duplicates where we're counting the walls by name and room. So we're passing in the wall name and the selected room ID. duplicates comes back with nil, i.e. there are none, then we're assigning the selected room ID to the wall add edit object's room ID, and I'm assigning temporary values to these variables for the moment. They will be needed for the fancier dialog, but for this simple dialog they're just not needed. Then we're going to call the wall service wall create, and if successful it'll refresh the data grid for the walls and then hide the dialog. If not, it'll give an unexpected error. If the room exists already, that's the other half of this, if duplicates equals 0, it's going to say wall already exists for this room using the Syncfusion dialog service. So we should save all the files and run the application to just check that the add button is working. So it runs. I can select a project. Now I ought to try checking that we can add a wall without selecting a room. So select that and it says no room selected. So that's great. We can select one room, select add. It opens the dialog with add a wall, and we can give it a name like, and give it an area and save, and that works. And if we try adding the same wall again, we should get an error message, and it does. So it's not allowing us to add that. But there is one flaw with this, and if I select shower room, we'll see that we've still got rear wall showing here. So we need to deal with that. So back to the code. To handle that error, we need to check that when we select a different room, that the walls grid is initialized. And we can do that by adding the following to the room row select handler. So it's back to rooms. And we can put this in here to initialize the walls. One more quick check that that works. Select a project, select a room, add a wall. If I go to shower room, it should now initialize the grid for walls, which it does. Good, that works. To edit a wall record, we must ensure that the user has selected a wall row from the grid. And to do this, we use the wall row select handler to derive the wall ID and the wall name and wall square meters, and then check that the wall ID is not 0 when calling edit from the wall toolbar. So we can add the following to the wall row select handler to get the variables we'll need. So we'll be declaring a selected wall ID, a selected wall name, and a selected wall square meters. So I'll declare those at the top of the code. And with those declared, we can now deal with the wall grid toolbar handler for the edit section, where we want this code. So the first thing is we're going to give the dialog a title of edit a wall. Then we're going to check that a wall has been selected, and if it hasn't, we're going to say please select a wall using the Syncfusion dialog service. And then I'm going to populate the wall add edit object with these pieces of data that we've just obtained to start with. So those are the values from the row, the wall row that we've selected, and that will allow us to edit them. Now the save method has already been created, but we need to modify it to handle edits. So let's deal with that. So first of all, I'm going to be checking for duplicates, and in this case we're counting the walls by name and room and the ID of the wall being edited. If we aren't creating any duplicates, we're going to update the wall and then refresh the data grid for the walls, and then hide the dialog. If anything goes wrong, we'll issue a warning, and if we discover a duplicate, we're going to say this already exists for this wall. This wall already exists for this room. We're now only left with the delete toolbar option. And for this, we can kind of copy and paste and then amend the code used for deleting the room. So let's deal with that. So it's quite simple. We're checking that a wall has been selected, and then we're using the Syncfusion dialog service to confirm that they want to delete the selected wall. And if they say yes, we'll call the wall service wall delete, and then refresh the wall service, or refresh the wall service walls read by room immediately afterwards. Right, so that should be okay. So we ought to just test those last few things. So we'll run the application. So select a project, select a room, select a wall, and we'll try editing it. And I can. And I ought to just check that we can't edit one and end up with the same name as one we've already got. It doesn't matter about the area. And it says it already exists, so that's great. So they look as if they're working, but I think we could discover that they're not quite working. If I delete a room, if I select shower room, for example, bathroom, and delete it, we've got the walls grid is still populating. If we add a new room, that again still leaves the walls grid populated. And selecting a different project also leaves the walls grid populated. So we need to make sure that whenever we do one of these things, such as selecting a new project, that the walls object that we're using is initialized. So let's have a look at that. So let's start by looking at the delete option on the room's toolbar handler. Now notice the room's toolbar handler that we want to deal with, and what we want in here is that if a room is deleted, we want to make sure that the walls is set to an empty object and the selected room is also set to 0, so that it looks as if there's no room selected. And we want the same code on room save for adding a record. So we can enter it here. And lastly, on the change project. So we can pop that in here. We've already got selected room ID equals 0, so we don't need that on here. So we ought to run it one more time and check that those work. So let me add some walls for the shower room. Now if I try adding a room and actually save it, no room is selected and the walls aren't displayed. selecting a different project clears out the rooms and the walls, and deleting a room refreshes the walls grid as well. If I quickly add some walls for the kitchen, we can see that the formatting of the area here isn't very good. It's showing it 8.76 or 8. We want a constant number of decimal places here. Oh, and it would also be nice to have a total at the bottom. So we haven't quite finished yet. We want to format those. So we'll deal with the simple one first. To format the square meters column in the walls grid, we want to add a format section, a format statement. And it is in the walls grid. And for the area, doesn't matter where we put it, we want, and I'm going to make it N3 to 3 decimal places. So that should have corrected the variable number of decimal places. But adding a total is a lot more complicated, and I will simply put in the code necessary for this. It's called grid aggregates, and we say which field we want aggregated and the type of aggregation and the format, and then we add a footer template, which is essentially putting in the text saying total net area and then the amount that we want. So now if we run it, we can test it for one last time. Select our room, and we've got the area formatted to 3 decimal places, and we've got the total net area, that total item there. I think that just about completes it for this video. I'll put links in the description to any information I think would be helpful, including a link to the blog which contains the code for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any comments, please leave them in the comments section and I'll be happy to try and answer them. Thank you very much.